Welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of Thriving Now. I'll be your host for this edition. I'm Dr. David Kamnitzer. Christine Healy is still on special assignment. I'm very excited about today's show. Today we'll be looking at the Enneagram, which some of you are familiar with, but we're going to be looking at it in a special light. We're going to be looking at it as a tool for transformation. And I'm very, very, very excited about this show because, as many of you know, transformation is my passion. I've been a student and a teacher of transformation now for over 35 years. And what excites me so much about transformation is that it provides an access route for people to get beyond this vicious circle of concepts which determine experiences, which reinforce the concept, which reinforces the kind of experiences people have. There's that vicious circle, and transformation provides an opportunity to know yourself beyond that endless loop, and that's very exciting. But one of the things that has been missing in transformational theory and practice has been very precise, powerful ways to help people to discover their particular blind spots that keep them from accessing a more authentic self. And also, once they do access that more spacious authenticity, there's not a lot of guidance in transformational theory about helping people to discover their particular strengths and talents and gifts. And I've always had a sense that the Enneagram could do that, could provide that particular missing link in transformation, and yet I hadn't quite come across a application of the Enneagram that was powerful enough and precise enough to really deliver, and now I have. And so I'm excited to share what I've discovered with you today, and I'd like to bring in and welcome my guests, David and Katherine Fauvre. So welcome. And David and Katherine are Enneagram experts, and Katherine is also the developer of a very exciting development in Enneagram theory and practice called the Tritype. And we'll be getting into that tonight, and I will volunteer myself as a guinea pig so that we can bring out the power and the magic of the Enneagram and the Tritype, especially in the context of transformation. So I'm going to turn to my guests now, and here we go. So welcome.
We're happy to be here. Very much.
All right, so tonight's all about showcasing your work in the context of transformation. And so I don't know if you've ever been interviewed in that light, but I want to just open it up, and anything you'd like to say about kind of what brought you to the Enneagram and what brought you to Tritype, and also anything you want to say about to what extent you've looked at your work in the context of transformation.
Go ahead, there's a lot to be said.
Yeah, there's a lot of good questions there. I mean, in brief, I was in graduate psychology school and happened to become interested in the Enneagram, not through the school I was at, but through a Riso and Hudson program. And the story I've told many times is that the first week in their training, I felt I had learned almost as much about human behavior as I did in 3 years in graduate school. So for me, the system was completely transformative, to use that term, in terms of being able to identify with great accuracy what someone's internal experience was. And that was just fascinating to me. So I'm a type 4, my Tritype is 468. So that really began this journey, and a few years later, Katherine and I met and started working together. So
maybe before we go on, so we don't lose anybody, we used a term there that is kind of specific, but we didn't define it. So maybe a quick definition of Tritype, and then we'll just continue on with the story.
For those that are familiar with the Enneagram, they're used to identifying one key type, which is our focus of attention, their habitual ways in which we respond to the world. We use our head, our heart, and our gut. And Tritype identifies your dominant Enneagram type in each center of intelligence. So as David said, as a 4-6-8, that means he uses his heart, which is 4. He uses 6 as his head type, and he uses 8 as his gut type. Would you want to say anything more about that?
Well, so let's continue the story about how you guys crossed paths with the Enneagram and how tritypes emerged.
For me personally, I've always been interested my entire life on what makes people tick. From the time I was a child and read little Dell books on everything you can imagine, I wanted to know what I could about why people do what they do. And then I found the Enneagram about 25 years ago, and I was astounded at the Enneagram's ability to identify not only behaviors, but more importantly, why. And I had to learn everything I could. And then 16 years ago, I decided to go through the process of certifying with anyone that would have me. I went to every workshop, every program available at the time. And that's where I met David. I began with my first body of research because the certification program asked to correlate the Enneagram with something else. And I was using self-image since I had experience in that area. And I wanted to know as much as I could from the inside out. David talked about the internal experience. Well, that's what was pure gold for me, and I wanted to know that. So I attended every workshop multiple times just so that I could meet people to find that out.
Okay, but let's keep going. So then what happened?
So we met.
Okay.
And actually we met through Riso and Hudson, but I also certified with Palmer and Daniels and Hurley and Donson. And when we met, Riso and Hudson had been suggesting that we meet one another, and we thought, who's that? Why would we want to meet one another? But then we did. And we found we had much in common and a great passion for the Enneagram, not just in terms of our own personal work and transformation, which we were clearly both interested in, but that we had shared ways of approaching the information and that we wanted to go deeper and that we wanted to compare and contrast. And David had an incredible expertise that I did not possess at all in terms of understanding computers and the internet. Remember, this is 15 years ago, so a lot has changed. And David was able to initiate some early online chat rooms where we hosted different authors, and then people could be anywhere in the country and get online and learn about the Enneagram, and not just through a book. What would you add?
So can you continue kind of weaving the story and then bring in how tritypes came into focus for you guys, and then once you kind of got that idea, how you moved with that idea?
Yeah, in brief, Katherine had begun doing research projects for her certifications in the 90s. And when I met her, I was completely stunned by the level of discovery, really, that she had come across in doing really the only true empirical research that was being done in the field that I was aware of. So around 2000, we started to computerize a lot of this and start to gather more and more data online. We started building Enneagram tests based out of this research. We started using those tests to confirm more research. So we basically started gathering huge amounts of data in terms of everything from the language use that the different types use to the way that they will go through an Enneagram test. And we started to correlate those two pieces. And we've done that now for over a decade. And out of those results, certain amazing patterns started to emerge. And Katherine was certainly the first one.
They confirmed what I found.
Right.
I mean, the critical thing is that I couldn't quite understand how people could be so consistent and not even know one another. And when I did my first body of research, I asked for pictures, and there was a questionnaire. And I expected some of the words to be consistent by type, but I did not expect people to send me the same pictures from the same magazines. It was so powerful that there was a visual representation, and then the lexicon, the word choices was amazing. And then when I worked one-on-one with people over and over and over again, I found that they used 3 types and they weren't always connected by a wing or a line, and I couldn't explain it, but it was too consistent. Then I learned about Oscar Ichazo's work with Trifix, which he had later. It wasn't a part of the first dissemination of the Enneagram, and it validated my findings. And then I had to know more. And then that's where David and I joined forces, and he took it online. Actually, aspects of it in 1997 were online. I think the questionnaire was, or even 96.
Very early. One of the things that's helped us so much is that so much in the Enneagram field is very heuristic, at least the way it was initially developed. It was, kind of very theoretical or observational. There was very little to really back up what people were asserting. I mean, some people might do coaching and they had some personal experience, but one of the pieces that's been so helpful for us is to have these tens of thousands of questionnaires correlated to a testing instrument. And that's allowed us to be able to actually find these patterns that Katherine discovered of tritype. That, for example, even in your test, we will see sets of the language use that you use is the language of 3 different types.
And this is so exciting for me because one of the basic tenets of transformation is that we language our world. We literally language forth our world. And the fact that the Enneagram types were so validated by your linguistic patterning, and then to bring in the work of the 3 centers of head, heart, and gut, and to see that you saw these patterns. You saw, I don't know if this was something you expected.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
No.
I just,
okay.
I was
so
just,
you saw that by how people, what people focused on and how they said what they said, you actually saw, without having the preconception, the validation of the model of the 3 types of intelligence.
I was just curious as to how the types, what words they would use to describe themselves. It began as just a project for certification. Out of curiosity, I had no expectation that they would choose so many of the same words.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, let's segue into the particulars. I think somebody once said if you really knew a blade of grass, you'd know everything. So let's get to the specifics. I'm going to be the guinea pig tonight, and I'm very excited to share this with you. It's kind of a personal thing. You'll see how penetrating Katherine and David's way of looking at me is, and I've done a lot of work on being aware of myself, and I can honestly say that I asked Katherine a couple of weeks ago at lunch, I said, if you knew nothing else about me, nothing about my history, nothing at all, but you just knew my tritype and you knew the order of, in my particular case, the priorities, what could you say about me? And she spoke for like 90 seconds, and she in the best way, she nailed me. I mean, it was so honoring my uniqueness, but without limiting me. And that's one of the beautiful things for me about this work, is because one of the challenges we all have along the spiritual path is how do we honor the uniqueness, the unique love that we are, without having that go to our ego, without having that be an argument for separation, without having that be an argument for better than, worse than, judgment, right, wrong, dominate, avoid domination, justify yourself, invalidate others. How do you have that uniqueness be a doorway to the whole, to the love, to spirit? And to me, that's the beauty of what the work here has to offer. So I'm going to just lay myself bare here as a guinea pig so that the things we're talking about can come to light. And particularly I want to focus on the the blind spots of my particular type, and also focus on the strengths and the talents and the gifts of my type. And I think you'll really get a flavor for the work.
Well, the first thing I'd want to add to that is that David was able to actually create the Enneagram cards based on those word choices. And then we were able to give people this testing instrument that had the images and the keywords. And in your case, I'll never forget this because David very much wanted to keep it simple, because to have to even create the framing, wireframing is technically, I'm learning these things, it's not my nature. But anyhow, what was needed to be able to set it up on the test online, and I said, I really want to know the top choices of every time we give them the cards. And he said, why? No, that's not critical. I said, it's going to be critical later. I don't know why or how.
Is that like when you go to the optometrist and they say, is this clear or is this clear? Oh, this clear? Okay, now that'll be the new standard. Now, is this clear or this clear? And then eventually they get it?
I drive him crazy,
yeah, there's
pretty
a
much.
version of that.
You know?
I mean, the way our test works, we definitely will get to interpreting you, but there's a couple interesting pieces. We worked with an MIT PhD programmer to analyze our data, and he was able to validate what we had found.
Mm-hmm.
And with our test, we basically give you the same test 4 times in a different order. But what's so interesting about that is to see how consistent it is, how the person goes through the test. And we had no idea when we built the test that would, in and of itself, would reveal so much, part of which reveals tritype. So maybe we can take a look at David's
Yeah,
tritype.
and the power of comparing and contrasting.
Right.
So because David was willing, I was able to get the 6 cards, and we call it the Ennea spread, and that's the dominant time, every time you were given 3 cards. And in your case, your top 2 cards were type 4. And whenever you have a pattern, it indicates that that's a higher probability that you are that type. There are false positives,
Right.
but we look at more than that. And we didn't understand how critical this would be either. In your particular case, you also have 2 7 cards and 2 1 cards. It's one of the few tritypes where you could actually have that pattern because of what the types are compared to. So when I see something like 2 4 cards, 2 7s, and 2 1 cards, I'm going to think potentially that you might be that tritype. But we also have the inquiry on your potential tritype where we asked in a different order, and you did choose the same 3 cards. So then let's look at the words, because it's the lexicon that validates or further elucidates what type you are. Some people might have 3 different dominant types. In your case, it remained the same. That increases the probability. Now, people that know their Enneagram type can make this happen for the most part, but if you really just want to know, you can take the test thinking in terms of what was true for you most of your life, most of the time. But the sentence completion questionnaire, which was the very first questionnaire that I did in 1995, tells us even more. And in your case, when I asked 5 adjectives for you to describe yourself, you used focused, service-oriented, committed to excellence, creative, and visionary. Well, right now I can tell you, because of my experience and then collecting this data together, that anyone that says focused generally has access to 3, or a 3-wing, or a line of connection to 3, or they're just a focused person. 1s occasionally will use that word, but the type to use it most frequently is type 3. So that's telling me that if you are the 471, that 3 is now showing up, so it's confirming that probability. And when you said service-oriented, well, the type most inclined to say that is the 2. So now I'm getting both the 2 and the 3, and you came out as a 4. Now I have 3 heart type representations. So that further increases the probability that you're a heart type. So this is how it works. It's kind of inductive and deductive at the same time. And then committed to excellence. Wow, this is such a 4-word, I can't even tell you. 7s like it too, but 4s love the word excellence and being committed to it. And then the visionary, creative also, 4 and 7 and 8 use the word creative. Visionary we get with 7s and 1s. 4s can as well, but here's your 7 showing up and affirming what we already saw with your Ennea spread. Greatest strength, teacher. This is mostly 1 and 4, but anyone can be a teacher, but the types that will actually write it down are 1 and 4. And then I ask why, because I'm always looking at what more I can gather. And in your case, you said it uplifts others, and I'm excellent at it. So the uplifting part is also 4 with 3 and the 7, both, and even more 7 than the 4. But when they come together, it's very, very dominant. And greatest weakness, sticking with what is not working for too long. That's hard for this tri-type because it's the visionary, and David will say more about that. But there's a need to do things well and to have high standards. Then when I said why, you said pride. Now this is 2, and so this is the hard issue again, but that's also human nature. Pride is very important to all of us. Color in blue, it's the most common color for men, and just out of reference, it's the 5s and 6s that like it the most. Favorite symbol, flower of life and spiral. Now we're back into 4 and 7, the 2 coming together. And creature, dove. Now this is not so much indicative of a particular type, but often represents the inspired. It can also represent a spiritual focus.
Yes.
And let's see what else would be helpful to you. You said you need love. That is very common with the sexual one-to-one instinct that wants the drive for wholeness and completeness. Also,
Let me stop you for a second.
Also 7.
Because we didn't talk about that. So I want to, when we talk about things we haven't talked about, I want to define it a little bit.
Okay.
So there's an overlay in addition to the things we talked about when we talked about the Enneagram types and we talked about the tri-types. There's also another overlay in the matrix called subtypes, which we don't have time to get into, but that's what Katherine was referring to. One of the subtypes, the 3 types are self-preservation, sexual, and social, in terms of where the focus is. And so we don't have time in this show to get into that, but that's what she was talking about.
You also reference spiritually bold, you reference intelligent and energy, and this is what I see with the 4 and 7 coming together with the 1 as a driver. So with this combination, you get the visionary.
So with your tri-type combination, which Katherine and I can both look at for you, it's the first piece to understand is it's a triple idealistic combination, right? So 4, 7, and 1 are all looking at the idealistic way that things can be, but from 3 different perspectives. So the 4 is sort of ideal relationship, 1 is ideal process or procedure, and then 7 is going to be kind of the ideal utopia. So if you happen to be doing spiritual work or transformative work, that would be a really nice combination, because generally that type is visionary in terms of that they're able to see possibilities. They're able to see what can be. And they also will have a very discerning ability. All 3 of those types are very discerning in terms of whatever field that they're in. And they're also they can be very, particularly 4 and 7 can be very cutting edge. The challenge of the blind spot is going to be reconciling that idealism with the practical day-to-day reality. That the transformation is gonna not be as quick as you can see it in your mind.
Right.
And the trick is to somehow, I keep thinking of that saying of, well, what's it like to be enlightened? And they say, well, before you're enlightened, it's chop wood, carry water. After you're enlightened, it's chop wood, carry water. And so I think, with this particular tritype, the growing edge is to recognize that the search for ideal circumstances at times can be unrealistic or limiting, or take you out of of how everything right now is good just the way that it is. It's like Byron Katie says, when you argue with reality, you only lose 100% of the time.
I have to interrupt because we only have a couple minutes
Sure,
left,
sure,
but I
please.
want to validate that I think one of the things that's really kind of saved me from some of the downsides of this has been that in the transformational world that I live in, one of the tenets is after awareness, the very next tenet is acceptance. And allowing what you perceive to be as it is, and allowing your sense of yourself in the moment of that perception to be as it is. And so I think, you hit the nail on the head. If my ego was running the show, I would be very critical and judgmental. And so to be able to transmute that into discernment is really, a saving grace for me.
Absolutely.
Well, I know we've got about 2 minutes left. And so I think this little vignette here, it's been my pleasure and my privilege to bare my soul to you because I think this gives you a flavor for the power of the work and how, of course, it doesn't factor in. It's like astrology. It doesn't factor in the level of consciousness of the person, but through talking, you can get a feel of where the cutting edge is and how to help people. So in the minute we have left, is there anything you want to say to the viewers in closing?
I would just say that if you understand your tritype, then you can really accept yourself, as you mentioned, and be more understanding of others as well.
Yeah,
and be kinder.
Yeah, I would just say
yourself.
what we're finding is that for people that use the Enneagram or want personal growth, the tritype is greatly accelerating the process of growth using the Enneagram tool.
That's great. And so we'll close with love and peace. Bye for now. Okay.
All right.
That was good. You woke up a little.